I don't know if there's ever been a better time to say it on this show. Here we go, Jim.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin, and thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in this, the greatest sport on planet Earth. Brett Yormark spoke about the playoff, and he has a point to make. And then I have a point to make in regards to the point that he made. And USC got another recruit who I really like, really like, but context is required here. That's all on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So, we're so back. We're so unbelievably back. I see this running joke on Twitter all the time, where someone's like jokingly asking a fan base, tell me, last week you said it was over, but this week you're saying we're back. How can that be true? Well, here's how we're back. The Pac-12 is like this close. I mean this close to adding its eighth member, and boy, it looks like it's going to be Texas State. There's plenty of logic here, but a huge piece over in ESPN, according to Pete Thamel, that Texas State is the top option. Now, let's start with the cryptic social media posts and a beaver on the San Marcos River, and all these sorts of things. I came into hosting these sorts of shows skeptical of such things. Like, for example, a couple of years ago, before the Pac-12 went up in flames, and now, like a phoenix, it's reborn from the ashes of in a manner, and there was a picture that got tweeted out by the Duck. Maybe it was tweeted out by Brutus. I don't know. It was a picture of Brutus and the Duck, which unironically are probably the two favorite mascots for Lee Corso, who will have his final show this year, and I do not talk to me on that day, just so we're clear. When Lee Corso has his final game day show, don't talk to me. I'm not going to want to talk to anybody, ever. So anyway, I'll let you know when I'm ready to talk. There was a photo that was tweeted out, and it said, "Big things coming." And people took that to mean, oh my gosh, Oregon is going to go. They're going to go to the Big Ten. They're going to leave the Pac-12. And I said, guys, come on. They're not going to announce this move if, with a photo of a couple of mascots. They're not doing that. Well, it wasn't the announcement, but it was kind of an indicator that something was coming down the pipeline. And so now I see this sort of stuff, and I'm reading posts about soup, and it's just like there's all this sort of stuff, and it sounds crazy, but it's not. What's crazy anymore? Rafael Devers just got traded to the Giants for a ham sandwich and a pile of nickels. What's crazy? Luka Doncic went to the Lakers the year after he and Kyrie took the Mavs to the finals. What's actually crazy? Certainly not this. The appeal of Texas State is very real. Now, I have discussed and argued for a long time that the Pac-12's number one option should be UNLV. I believe that it was. That has been reported by people who know more than me. And one of the points that I made during that time period was they could add Texas State seemingly any time they want to, because the exit fee, as long as it's before July 1st, oh yeah, this is going down in the next 2 weeks. Make no mistake about it. The exit fee to get them out of the Sun Belt is relatively cheap, whereas getting schools out of the Mountain West or getting schools out of the American, of course there's litigation that's still ongoing with the Mountain West, getting schools out of those conferences is more expensive and therefore more complicated. And Oregon State and Washington State can offer some, or the Pac-12 conference, I should say, can offer some money to help, but not a ton to deal with exit fees and whatnot. So Texas State has always been available. And if Texas State is Texas State a good option? Yes, absolutely. I understand the appeal. I also understand why they wouldn't be option number one. There's also been discussion about, and Thamel wrote about this, Memphis being added as a football-only member. That doesn't appear to have any legs right now either. And so Texas State coming into the conference would give you the 8th full-time member that has football that you are looking for, in addition to Gonzaga. We'll see if they go get St. Mary's for the basketball side of things. But you have to do it. It's going to get done in the next couple of weeks. The media deal hasn't been announced. Thamel seemed, without throwing a number out there, Thamel basically said it's going to be in the $8 million range. Because initially, and when I tell you that there was some PTSD I had to process before I came on here and did this show, when I got to this part of the article. The Pac-12 once thought their media deal was going to be more valuable, but it's not going to be as valuable as they thought. Oh man, what a time! That was a time. That was an era. It was one of the stretches of time in the history of the world, no doubt about it. And so, anyway, they thought they could get over $10 million. They probably won't, but it'll be more than what the Mountain West was giving their schools. So it is still a financially successful move, or will be, for the former Mountain West schools that are coming over, meaning it'll probably be in the $8 to $9 million range, because depending on the school you're talking about, the Mountain West was paying, I think, somewhere between 5 and 7 most of the time. So Texas State gives you a foothold in the state of Texas. I think that is certainly valuable from a television and recruiting standpoint. I get the appeal. I also understand why they weren't the top option, because sending all your sports out there, not ideal. It is not an ideal situation, but we don't have an ideal world of college football and college athletics, so you got to just take the bad with the good. The next question that pops into my mind, though, if this offer materializes as it is expected to, is who's going to go with them, if anyone? Because if you don't have, are you going to make Colorado State and Texas State travel partners? It's not exactly what schools would like to be able to do. Think about the old world Pac-12, RIP. When you went down to Los Angeles for any sport, you made one plane trip. I know this sounds like complaining about, a relatively insignificant amount of time in the grand scheme of things. I'm telling you it's not, because all the sports have to do it. When you went to play USC and UCLA, as Big Ten schools do now in basketball, you fly to LA and you drive from one campus to the other. When you used to go play Oregon or Oregon State, they're about a 45-minute drive apart. Washington State, further apart, but still more reasonable. The Bay Area schools, within an hour, hour and a half. The Arizona schools, you bus from one place. It gets more expensive when you have to go to one place and then fly to another, and that's one road trip. So I have said before, and continue to think, adding 2 schools, I think could be valuable. Would you be able to get UTSA and reignite the I-35 rivalry? I don't know, is the answer to that question. Probably not. Would North Texas work? Sure. 2 Texas schools? Now we're talking. But it's on the horizon. And this is not Rogue One where there's no horizon. No, there is a horizon. It's just a matter of when it will arrive. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, all that good stuff. Brett Yormark over in the Big 12 has thoughts on the playoff, and I have thoughts about his thoughts on the playoff, because of course I do. That's my job. First, this episode brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing like the NBA playoffs. The intensity, the buzzer beaters, the fans losing their minds. It's the kind of atmosphere you must experience live to see Tyrese Halliburton, just be awesome. And this year's matchups are already delivering. If you want in, Game Time makes it fast and easy to get seats, even for the biggest playoff games. Prices on the app actually drop closer to tip-off, and with killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees, Game Time is a total game changer. I've benefited from all 3 of those features myself when I have used Game Time in my own personal life. And guess what? The experience was great. Got a great deal. Knew what I was expecting. No surprise fees. The tickets were delivered right to my phone. Bing, bang, boom, you're done. Just like that. It was great. So there are a lot of great things about Game Time. That's why you should check them out. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So Brett Yormark was over on the Triple Option show not too long ago. And when asked about the 4-4-2-2-1-1 playoff format hypothetical, which is one of the potential options we have going into 2026, where wildly enough, it's really wild to think about that college football, as of now, does not have a television or structure for its playoff next year. Next year. There is no other sport in which that is the case. But hey, it's the greatest sport on planet Earth, so I'm not trying to make it like all the other sports. Not in most cases, anyway. But Yormark said of the 4-4-2-2-1-1, quote, "I didn't like it. I felt like it created a huge divide between us and the Big Ten and SEC. I did... Created? Past tense? I'll have what he's having. I don't know what I don't think he's legitimately, at least I hope, he's not legitimately under the impression, no, there's no gap between us and the Big Ten and SEC. Well, you've got a media rights deal. They've got a media rights deal. One of these things is not like the other. One of these things just doesn't belong. And so the gap that he's talking about is financial, is or that I'm talking about, I guess I should say, but that he knows about, whether he'd admit it publicly or not. It's financial, it is competitive, it's branding. They have all sorts of issues in the Big 12 in comparison to the Big 10 and SEC. I think that gap is narrowing. I think if NIL Go and the House settlement can hold up in courts, you're going to have a smaller gap than you did before. If there is actually a punitive arm of this new governing body in college football that can give legitimately strict, harsh, real deterring, real punishments of deterrent. I hate English. I hate English. I don't know how many of you know this about me. I also speak Spanish. I find it to be a significantly easier language. English is easier to speak. Here's what I'm trying to say. The punishments need to be severe enough, and if they can actually be enforced so that they can actually deter illegal actions from taking place. That's what I'm trying to say. But English is just this dumb, mixed, jarbled nonsense of language. I should just start doing this show in Spanish and see how quickly my audience declines and how quickly I have a call from my boss. Anyway, getting back on topic here. So, Yormark has expressed support for the 5+11 format, which is the one I would like to go with. I am a fan because I am more pro-committee than most. I do not think they get it right all the time in the rankings. I do think when it comes to selecting the teams that deserve to go and compete for a national championship, they have gotten it right over and over and over again. And so even though I don't like that they are willing year in and year out to put the Missouris or Tennessee from a couple of years ago into the top 25, and I've railed against that here on my show, I think they get way more right than they get wrong. And they just a year ago didn't acquiesce to the SEC's request. They were disinclined to acquiesce to their request. They learned from Captain Barbosa and Elizabeth Swann. They said, no, we're not going to do that just because you want us to. Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina, you can watch the playoff from home. Learn to beat teams like Vanderbilt and Kentucky next time, and we'll let you in. But I think that, Brett Yormark's mentality that I've talked about before here on the show of I'm going to bet on myself. We want the results on the field to matter. I'm going to bet on our conference. I'm going to do all this. I respect that angle. Even if it's where he's being boxed into, even if he doesn't actually want the 5+11 and he thinks what, some other big time pundits have said about it before, which is, no, this is terrible, this is horrible, this is just going to be, a psyop, this is going to be a, takeover by the Big Ten and SEC, like opposed to what? As opposed to what? Them guaranteeing they get at least 8 teams in combined? 5+11 doesn't guarantee that, guarantees 1. Probably 2. And with the conference championship game loser will probably also get in. Okay. Now you got to go out and earn it, and you got to earn it in the eyes of the committee. Not everybody likes that. I'm more okay with that. I appreciate that Brett Yormark is willing to take that stance of, you know what? We don't want to sit here and whine and complain. We don't want to sit here and think about what the world could be or what the world should be. Take the world as it is, not as you would like it to be. The movie quotes are all over today. I don't really know why. It's how my brain works. That was Captain America, the Winter Soldier. But that's where I think his mentality is. I appreciate that. I really do. It's very much a hunker down and control what you can control sort of deal. Because you know what? Some things, whether in football, on the field, off the field, in life, in golf, if you're somebody who golfs like I do, sometimes you got to go out and say, you know what? I can only focus on what I have within my control. What does Brett Yormark have within his control? His conference, his teams, his member institutions. And so if he's got to go back to them and say, you know what? This isn't the format that we wanted. This isn't necessarily best for the league, but I think it's the best for college football, and we've got to go out and be better. And yeah, we're working at a disadvantage here, but we're getting some help from the House settlement, potentially, if that puts some restrictions on things. But we as a conference have to go out, and whatever happens, let's go down swinging. He's got to look at Texas Tech and hold them up as a shining example to the rest of the conference of, hey, this is what you should look like. You want to keep up in the new world. You want to have the ability for your 10-2 to be seen as more worthy of a playoff spot in the eyes of the committee than 9-3 SEC. Go be Texas Tech. Go brand your programs as strongly as you possibly can so that they give you ingrained levels of respect that aren't always afforded to teams in that conference or teams that are not in the Big Ten or SEC. Go out there and earn it year after year. Go out and schedule quality non-conference games. Go out and win those quality non-conference games. Go do all of those things. And you know what? Maybe at the end of the day, it won't be good enough sometimes. But you gotta go out and just make it happen as best you can. I respect that mentality a lot. Do I see the flaw in that thinking? Yeah, sure. But I think he's trying to make the best of a bad situation. Sometimes that's all you can do. I also just really got to chuckle. I felt like that format created a gap. Created? How about widened? Widen the gap. But any format's going to widen the gap. So USC is widening the gap in 2026. Context is required. So to nobody's surprise, at least if you pay attention to college football, USC has done it again. They have gone out and landed an elite prospect in the class of 2026, and they continue to retain the number one recruiting class in the country. Not just based on volume. It certainly helps. Not every guy's a 5-star recruit. You can't have a class of entirely 5-star recruits, but Talanoa Ely, pretty close to being a 5-star recruit. Top 80 player nationally, number 4 linebacker according to the 24/7 Sports composite ranking, and top 5 by just about every metric you look at. 6'3", 215 pounds. I'm sure he can add a little bit more weight, but I mean, this is pretty built out. I have liked this guy's film for a really, really long time. There's nothing not to like. He is indeed a prototypical modern-day linebacker, I think, in a lot of ways, and just the caliber of athlete that has not historically in recent history. Recent history, I won't say historically, recent history, he has not wound up at USC. Not consistently enough. Well, now all of a sudden, USC's starting to land those sorts of guys. And it's not just the offensive players like Pepe, the offensive tackle, or Mark Bowman, the 5-star tight end, who I've talked about here on the show. But, flipping Tamahini Tupui from Oregon along the defensive line, really, really good pickup. Amongst other blue-chip defensive linemen and defensive players that they've gone out and picked up. Albert Hill, a corner, another guy that I like. So this class just continues to grow. It continues to get some really elite prospects, and the momentum around USC is palpable. It is very real. It is not made up. It is not imaginary. On the trail, they have a floor. They're probably the only class right now in the middle of June I'd say has a floor of a top 5 class. Like Ohio State has a couple of 5-star commits, 15 players overall. That could slip down to 6 or 7 at one point in time if they were to lose, one of those players or something. Like, I'm not predicting that to happen. I'm just saying it's reasonable. USC's class feels way too stacked with talent and too many players just overall to fall outside of the top 5. Now, the context that I wanted to add to this is this should not change anybody's expectations for the Trojans in the year 2025, or frankly, in the year 2026. Now, this attack on the high school recruiting trail, that sounds negative. This run of success, recruiting-wise for USC, has been a long time coming. Lincoln Riley should have been doing this from the start. I will get back to that. But just you wait, especially those of you that engage in the internet space. When USC loses a game this year, their win total, according to our friends at FanDuel, is 7.5. I can see him going over that. Kind of depends on what we're getting from Jaden Mayava. But what you will see this year, because of the offseason USC is having, is you will see, I think, more casual college football fans that are serious enough to follow recruiting, but not serious enough to think about what I'm about to say, will jump to the conclusion of USC should be great this year. Look at the way they've recruited in the offseason. What are you getting all those recruits for? Well, they looked at the results of the last 2 years when they were not recruiting as well, when they were transfer portal heavy, and it wasn't good enough. So the context to the USC 2026 recruiting heater that they are on, I think they'll get somewhere in the mid-30s, which is a massive, massive volume of players, especially nowadays in the age of the transfer portal. Typically, big classes that have this many blue chip recruits in it are topping out around 25, and USC has been over that for quite some time. Don't let it influence what your expectations are for them this year. Yes, the high school recruiting game is still incredibly important. I have another podcast here at this network, which I enjoy doing, and I got a question recently from a listener about the importance of high school recruiting. And, well, does it matter as much as it used to? I feel like it doesn't, because you can just go out in the portal. Let me give you the top 10 classes right now in 2026 with a notable surprise. Admittedly, there's a notable surprise. But USC, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Georgia, Clemson, Texas A&M, Penn State, Miami, LSU, Rutgers. 23 commits with 4 blue chippers there for the Scarlet Knights, according to 24/7's rankings. So which of those programs is not fully committed to winning a national championship? Rutgers, probably the only answer in there. I don't think they'll last there in the top 10. Maybe I'll explore that with Brian Smith later this week. But you still see the heavy hitters, the big brands, going after their high school classes, attacking it, going out and getting the best players. And yeah, they're still active in the transfer portal, but it does not mean you just disregard this sort of stuff. But I was just thinking about this, because this is what I think about all the time. College football. And I just thought, I bet you're going to have people that are going to throw USC's 2026 recruiting class at the Trojans this year as a jab. Like, yeah, all those recruits and you still can't win games. Well, yeah, we're really going to help them win this year because they're not on campus yet. But the other point that I want to make with USC and this recruiting class is there is no reason and no excuse that this shouldn't have been happening from the moment Lincoln Riley got there. Do you remember the hire of Lincoln Riley to USC was so big? Even Colin Cowherd gave it a whole segment and talked about it a bunch. Now, granted, USC only has to hold a practice for him to discuss them on his show, but it was a massive. He left Oklahoma. He's going to USC. Oh my gosh. He's going to revitalize the Trojans to where they used to be. And it's just taking him going into year 4 to realize maybe we should change the recruiting landscape around here. Is it all on him? No. Is it 80+% on him? I believe so. You have to have an administration that is on board, especially with NIL, to go out and recruit the way USC is now. And they finally are. But my response to that defense, which I've heard from USC fans, well, the administration wasn't on board. Why is that not a top priority for you as a head coach taking that job in that moment, leaving a school like Oklahoma, which Brent Venables has shown can still be recruited at in a really, really high level? How are you not asking the question? Because remember, an interview goes both ways. I'm sure many of you, like myself, have had job interviews before. And on the one hand, you're primarily the interviewee. But then a good employer will say, what questions do you have for us? Well, if Lincoln Riley wasn't asking, what's your NIL situation? How are you ready to adapt to this? What can we do on the recruiting trail? Or if he just wasn't placing the necessary emphasis that he needed to on that aspect of the program, that falls on him. So the final thought on this class is, any of the Trojan fans out there, I don't think there are that many of them, quite frankly, at least not in my experience. Any of the Trojan fans out there that would like Lincoln Riley gone if they struggle again this year, this recruiting class, ask Florida fans, this recruiting class will be a saving grace. Because Lincoln Riley will go to his athletic director, Jen Cohen, at the end of the year, if they go 5-7 and say, hey, I know this wasn't the season we wanted. I'm disappointed, and I know what we have to do in order to get better. But hey, I've got this top-ranked recruiting class. You can't let that fall apart. So this marriage is just going to continue. And you know what? It's fun to talk about, so I'm okay with that. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.